I'm going to welcome Ed to the stage to introduce himself and talk to us tonight about being brave. So give Ed a very big round of applause.
So I was told once by a very famous speaker that you always hold the mic right. I'm not sure why, so I'm going to try to practice that this evening. But hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us tonight. And I think Amy is going to be putting up my presentation in a moment. But I'm thrilled to be here, and we're going to be talking a little bit about something called bravery at work. And I would suggest, if we were to do an audit of the group, that you all have a moment in your past that you can think back on where you could have said something that was hard to say, or that you thought might be hard for that person to hear, but didn't. And you might even today have some regret about that. Or I can almost guarantee you that around the corner, there's a moment awaiting you where you will have an opportunity to say something or do something and not do it because of this topic of bravery. And so we'll talk a little bit about my background and my experience in a moment. Yet this topic of bravery at work really impacts all of us. And I have not done a study of everybody on the globe, but everyone I've ever met and anyone that I've ever talked to about bravery at work shakes their head because they get it, right? They get this thing called a feeling, right? And so this feeling is this body process. I'm not sure what I would call it, but this feeling that you get anytime there's something that you need to say, want to say, something that you want to do, but you can't. And you might sweat, your hands might get clammy, your stomach muscles might tighten, you might lose your voice, right? There's all these different impacts that each of us might have on this front. And it's really this feeling of bravery that I want to talk about tonight and share with you some ideas on things that you might do in the future to be brave at work. Because bravery at work is something that we can all do more effectively. And the beauty of it is that it is helpful. Most of us feel as though if we have to say something that is hard to say or do something that's hard to do, that it's not helpful, or that it feels like we're hitting somebody across the head with a 2x4, which we're not. We want to be helpful. We'll talk a little bit about that. So I think I've got to move my slides. And I'm actually going to skip all this stuff, because you can see my bio everywhere online where I've worked. Have you guys heard of Jordan Marsh, Filene's, and Leechmere?
Oh,
all right.
Stores are gone.
There you go. Every time I talk, less and less people have heard of them. So you know, time is passing. And I also do individual coaching, team coaching. I've written a couple of books, Raise Your Visibility and Value, Drive Your Career. We're going to give away some of the Drive Your Career books. And but what I want to do, rather than talk about my past, is ask you to make an assumption that I'm a leader, an expert in leadership development. I'm an expert in bravery at work. I'm not a person who has always been brave at work. And when I think back on my career at Iron Mountain and at Leechmere, Filene's, and Jordan Marsh, there were moments where I could have said something that I needed to say and didn't. And of course, I look back now on reflection and regret that I didn't say what I needed to say. But what I wanted to do was tell you a little bit about myself. So for some reason, back in 1973 or 74, when I was just a young little kid living in Fort Smith, Arkansas, I irrevocably fell madly in love with movies. And I don't know why, I don't know what happened, but to this day, almost 50 years later, I have a irrevocable love for mostly American movies. It drives my wife crazy because I love watching movies. I love going to the movies. And there are certain movies, no matter how many times they're on, I will watch them. And she will say things like, "Are you watching that again? Haven't you already seen that a dozen times?" And I don't know why it is. I don't know why there are certain movies that I just love to watch. And I'll share 3 of them with you quickly. None of them are any good, or, depending on your opinion, they may be good or not good. I don't know why I love these movies. Of course, if they were on every day, I wouldn't watch them every day, but they're on every 6 months or so. And now today, with all of the technological advantageous world we have, I can rent them and download them. So I don't even have to wait until they pop up on the TV. I can watch them. So the first one is a thriller that came out, and they're all from the 70s, which might be part of my childhood. The first one came out in 1974, and it was a thriller, and it had like this super big cast. And this is when I really first loved movies. And it had Paul Newman and Steve McQueen and William Holden and Faye Dunaway, and all these older Hollywood stars. Maybe some of you have seen it. Maybe you think I'm crazy, but it's called The Towering Inferno. And I don't know why, but every time that movie is on, I watch it. I know how it ends. I know like all the dialogue. I know what happens in the movie, but I love watching that movie. The second movie that I love to watch that comes out from time to time also came out in the 70s, and it starred Charlton Heston. It's not a great movie. Like when you watch it, there's all these little flubs and errors. Obviously not a movie they put a ton of money into, but it's called The Omega Man. And it's about the last man on Earth fighting these zombies who, suffered through World War III or IV or whatever. And it was based on a book by Richard Matheson. It was called I Am Legend, which was later made with the movie with Will Smith, which some of you may have seen. Same story. The original movie is much better. Actually, there was an earlier movie with this price in the 60s, but it's the one in the 1972 that I love. The last movie, and so I'm very serious when I tell you, every time these movies are on, I will tape it or I will watch it, even though I know how they end. And then the third movie that I love, and I'm a big James Bond fan, and my favorite James Bond movies are Sean Connery James Bond movies. I don't think anyone compares after Sean Connery. And he made 5 movies, and then he stepped out because he got tired of the role. They couldn't figure out the financing, and another actor took the role. And then he came back, and it's a movie I watched again and again and again. And it's called Diamonds Are Forever. I know how it ends. I know everything about this movie, but every time it's on, I watch it. I wish I knew why, and there's more of them, by the way. We don't have enough time for me to go through all the movies that come on that I watch repeatedly. But the reason I'm telling you this is because when you think about being brave at work, there are some things contextually that have to exist in order for you to do it. There's not a magic switch you just flick and say, oh, tomorrow I'm now going to be the bravest person ever and start saying everything I should say and do everything I should do. You need to have certain things in context. And 3 of those things are: 1, which is why I just shared with you my crazy, mad love of movies, is you need to have a positive relationship with the other person. When you look at your workplace, and if you rated everyone 1 to 6, there are some people who would be a 6. We finish each other's sentences, we get along great. If I needed to tell her something, I know I could. Always respectfully and professionally. No one's going to listen to you if you're not being respectful and professional, but always respectfully and professionally. And there are some people who are 1s. I'm not going to talk to that person. I can't talk to that person. That person won't listen to me, etc. In order to ensure that the effort you're putting forth to be brave at work will work, you have to have a positive relationship with that person. Not best friends, not margaritas on Friday nights every week, but a positive relationship with that person. The second thing you have to have in place contextually is you have to create the belief on the part of that person that you're there to help. If they think you're there to judge them, belittle them, make fun of them, prove to them you're right and they're wrong, whatever the list of things that might be, they're not going to listen. I'm only going to listen to a person whom I have a positive relationship with, and I'm only going to listen to a person who I believe is there to help me. If I don't think you're there to help me, I'm not going to listen, and it's not going to work. The third thing that needs to be in place, which is a little bit harder, and some of you may work in organizations like these, some of you may not, is you need to work in an environment where bravery is something that is recognized and rewarded. And for some of you, bravery may be a word that never comes up in the workplace. And for others, it might be in your mission statement. You talk about being brave and they recognize and reward it. You know, whatever it might be, your likelihood for being brave is greater if others are doing it and you are in an environment where bravery is recognized and rewarded. So a positive relationship, creating the belief that you're there to help that person, and I hope in almost every case that you are, and then working in an environment is super important in order to be brave at work. So about 3 years ago, I started looking and thinking about bravery about 5 years ago, but 3 years ago, I decided I wanted to do something a little bit different. I am self-employed, so I have to do things a little bit differently to keep things active and to stay visible in the marketplace. I started a podcast called Be Brave at Work. And, I met a friend who used to work with me at Leachmere, and he was in communication. We hadn't seen each other in 20 years. We went for coffee to Starbucks. He said, "Hey, I'm starting a podcast production company." I said, "Oh, how cool. I'd love to do a podcast." He said, "You're in. What's the topic?" And without a hesitation, when he said, "What do you want to talk about?" I said, "I know what I want to talk about. I want to talk about being brave at work, right? I want to bring this topic to the forefront, conversation and communication, because I believe, without any research, that this is something that everybody experiences sometime in their career, either with regret looking back, or for all of us, it's waiting right around the corner where this moment will come up. So we started this podcast, Be Brave at Work. We ended up speaking to, and I laugh when I think about it, 469 people. My device here won't work.
It doesn't like the arrow on the keyboard, you have to use that.
What do you need me to do?
Go at the top and switch to the USB.
User or
No,
pause 1 moment.
no, it's not this time, Ed.
Oh, okay. There we go. So we did 269 interviews. They're at bebraveatwork.com, all posted, all there. Find somebody you might know. We talked with anyone, and I don't mean anyone like they're not important, but it could be your average everyday person, because this is something that everyone experiences. We also talked with scientists, we talked with research professionals, we talked with college professors, we talked with people who are experts in bravery and courage and have written books on this topic, etc., all about bravery at work. And it was through this discussion that this model and idea that I want to share with you tonight really came to fruition. See if I can do this. In addition to that, we also conducted a survey. So we went out to anybody who had an email address and said, which was technically my network of people, so it's not anybody, but went out to my network and said, "Hey, we have 15 questions that we'd like you to answer about bravery at work." We had about 100 responses, again, influencing the impact and the information that we had. So the work that I want to share with you tonight is based on my own personal experience being a corporate employee for 20 years, a leadership coach for 15 years, working with leaders in all different organizations around the country in respect to what they do and how they do it, and their reflections and experiences with bravery at work, information from the podcast, and information from the survey. And in the survey, we found, one of our basic questions was, could you have shown more bravery at some point in your career? Can you think of an example? And much to my pleasure, but I knew this would happen, but I wouldn't know it until we did a survey. 96% of the people said, yes, there is a moment or a time in my past when something happened that I could have been braver, could have handled a little bit differently, wish I had said something, things of that nature. So I knew that this was a topic that would be very relevant to the, oops. I'm trying to figure this out. And this fall, I'm going to be publishing a book called Be Brave at Work. I've changed the second line, so it's now inspiring you to help your organization succeed. Because being brave at work is a way to help your colleague. If there's something your colleague's doing that they need to know about that isn't being helpful or might be injuring their reputation, I know I'd want to know it. Of course, I'd only want to know it from someone who I have a great relationship with and I know is helping me, not belittling me, making fun of me, taking advantage of me, things of that nature. That's something that I would want to know. So I hope what we talk about today will be helpful. We're also going to leave time at the end for questions. So for our friends who are here hybridly, as well as for all of you in the room, if you have a question as we're talking, raise your hand. If you have a story, we'd love to hear it, but just be brief because we have to end at 7:30. And we'll also save some time at the end for some questions as well. Device is very, very. Yes, Microsoft. Thank you, Microsoft, for use of this beautiful facility. So in the survey we did, we asked also for people to tell us a story or an experience that they had, and I'll share 4 of them with you. And for our friends who are hybrid, a former boss took a very aggressive, could be classified as bullying approach toward other employees, even when they were not direct reports. I was senior to those employees and junior to my boss. I witnessed the behavior and did not do anything about it. It led to at least one employee leaving the company and created a bad work environment. I can think about experiences that I've had at work where that happened, where some other boss was affecting people who worked with me or for me, and the impact, of course, was significant. I didn't speak up loudly enough about the performance issue regarding an employee. So this was another common behavior, right? That there's something I observed or saw. I could have said something about, maybe it was a misinterpretation, maybe they didn't have all the facts, whatever it might have been, but I didn't speak up when I could have to help that person or to bring clarity to the situation. I did not directly confront and talk to people who were unsupportive of a project I was leading. And the project ultimately failed due to a lack of buy-in and executive support. So we all know from our project management days that the vast majority of projects don't work or fail because of a variety of issues that might be surrounding them. Again, an excellent example of how someone could have been brave and worked and did not. And the last one is, I voiced my opinion on how the CEO was being dishonest about posting my job on the internet without telling me. That's always great. And he was considering replacing me. He told me he needed a younger outlook on the job and told me he would deny ever admitting to that. I should have brought a suit against him and I didn't. Not that we want to encourage litigation in the US because we all can sue for anything that we want here anyway, but again, another common opportunity about mistreatment or odd behavior in the workplace where someone could have said, might have said something a little bit different, but failed in order to do so. So I have a definition of bravery, again, from the survey, from the podcast, from my own work experiences, from the leadership work that I do with clients, which is really helping a colleague grow and develop. If you're not having a conversation with the person to help them grow and develop, don't have it. Because if you're not having it for that reason, it's not going to be helpful. By saying something that's hard to say, or maybe difficult to hear. So sometimes we're not brave because we don't know how to say what it is we want to say. We have it in our head, but when it comes out of our mouth, sometimes it doesn't come out the way we thought it would, or we jump to the point too quickly, or we fumble over our words, or as I can remember in my human resource career, we danced for an hour to the point where I said, why are we here? What are you talking about? Is there something you want to tell me? So we just don't know always how to say what we want to say, or we may be highly skilled at what we want to say, but I don't think you're going to hear it well, right? I'm worried about how you're going to react. Are you going to retaliate? Are you going to get mad at me? Are you going to have an emotional reaction, right? So oftentimes, because of that existence of that situation where I don't know what the reaction is going to be, I avoid being brave. So being brave is really helping someone grow and develop by saying something that's hard to say. We're going to talk about a way that you can work on that in order to get better at saying what you need to say, even if it's hard to say, or ensuring that what the person hears, that they hear without getting emotional and without, throwing the conversation into habit. So for all of us, if you do say something professionally and respectfully, and I always stress that if anything that you say is not professional or respectful, just like if it's not going to be helpful, don't say it because it won't be well received. But if you do say something to a boss, peer, or subordinate, or even a client or a vendor that is professional and respectful, regardless of how hard it is or of the outcome, you're being brave. You can't always dictate what the outcome is going to be. Just because you're being brave doesn't mean the person's going to respond or react the way that you wanted them to. This might be a 2 or 3 or 4 time conversation about a particular topic. But if you do say it professionally, respectfully, regardless of the outcome, you are demonstrating bravery. So we are not brave at work as we should be. What I'd love everyone to do, and I don't think the room is set up for this, I'm going to have everyone do silent thinking. It's a new training tool called silent thinking. I'd love everyone to think about a time in their past where maybe they could have been braver than they were. A time when you could have said something but didn't and regret it. Daniel Pink has written a book called The Power of Regret, a great book. He believes regret is good, even though we oftentimes feel like regret's bad. Well, I regret that, I feel bad about that. He believes that regret is good because you learned from it. Hey, last time this happened, I didn't feel good about it, so this time I'm going to do it a little bit differently. I've learned, right? I'm getting better at it. I think that's a very valid premise that he has. But regret is still something that we all feel and experience from time to time. So think for a minute about a time where you could have said something or done something and didn't. And then we're going to do part 2, which is ask a couple of you to share very quickly what it was. So don't make it too controversial. No. But think just for a couple of minutes on something that you could have said or done that demonstrated bravery. And our friends virtually, if they'd like to participate, Maggie, if you can do that, that would be great. And then let's see if a couple of folks who will share, raise their hand and share their story with us. So just take a couple minutes to think about that. You all should have one just off the top of your head, if my premise is accurate. So who here, other than a Agile board member or volunteer, because they're always the ones who raise their hand first, would love to quickly tell us a story about a time when they could have been brave but weren't. We have a mic, our mic handler here. And what is your first name?
Hello, I'm Tobias.
Hi, Tobias.
So, I had a situation when I had first started my company where I was with my engineering team. We were discussing some ideas about how to approach some work, and someone openly called someone else's idea stupid. And I was like, wow, I'm taken aback. I didn't know how and when to address it. So my regret is not addressing that situation. But I also see with the model that you presented that there's a way to address that with that person in their best interest, saying, hey, I'm worried you're going to have trouble building relationships with coworkers. Exhibit those kinds of behaviors. Story.
Great, thank you, Tobias. I appreciate it. I'm sure some of us are shaking their head. I think we've all seen outlandish behavior in meetings, and we say something at that moment. Some moments of bravery are instantaneous, right? We didn't anticipate it, but suddenly I have to do something. Some of them are planful. Hey, I need to talk to my boss. I'm really going to think about it and do it in a couple of weeks. But thank you, Tobias, for that example. Who else? Who else has an example of a bravery moment? Mark has one.
All right, well, that was the first question. My name is Mark. Nice to meet you. Some people in here know I used to run boats for a living, and I was working on a ship in Brazil as a chief mate, brand new, first time ever there. And the captain was on a different schedule than me. So the captain got off the boat after about a month, and a new captain came on. yelling, screaming, did not look or listen for a second, just came in, wanted to change everything and take control of the ship. He was fairly new in Brazil as well. Now, when I look back, I felt like I could have told him something to try to help him get out of his own way, because he was off the boat in 6 days. The crew actually.
6 days.
6 days.
Wow.
Yeah, the crew actually called the police on him and had him removed from the boat. So looking back now, yeah, I think I could have done something differently and said, I know what you're trying to accomplish here, but maybe there's a softer or better way to approach this. But again, I was brand new, so I've forgiven myself as well. I was only 3 or 4 weeks in, but what a mess. And if I had managed up properly, I could have changed the situation.
Right. Great, Mark, thank you. And look, regret isn't intended to be something that you reflect back on and feel bad about. I'm not attempting to make anyone feel bad. But I do hope that you think back on how could I have done it differently, or what would I have done today versus then in a different way, and then do it that way, right? So we can learn. How about one more? Maggie.
We got one.
We got one from the chat.
Okay,
Um,
hybrid input.
bear with me. The captain on a different schedule, yelling and screaming, wanting to change everything. He was. Oh, this is the same, sir. Okay, David, sorry. Here's an example of someone being brave at work. For example of someone being brave at work, my father stood up for someone he believed was being persecuted. And it probably cost my father that job. It did, however, raise my respect for him at least 5 notches.
Great.
Thanks, David.
And who is that, David? David, thank you. When we looked and did the survey, the first couple of reasons that people listed for not being brave, one of the top ones was fear of retaliation, fear of not getting promoted, fear of having, creating a bad relationship with somebody, right? Somebody they wanted to have a good relationship with. So the only way I can have a good relationship with you is to never cross you or challenge you or do anything different than what you had thought. So, you know, these are all human behaviors that we have that lead to bravery at work. So thanks for those examples, and I'm sure all of you have examples as well. So there are some reasons why we are not brave at work, and I'm just going to stay here because I'm going to flip up these slides. The first is really a lack of bravery in formal education. I don't know anyone here who went to junior high, high school, or college and majored in, or even had a class in bravery. We have not been trained. We have not learned how to be brave at work. Why not? I don't know. But the first day at your job, right, suddenly you're hit with something that requires you to be brave. You're like, well, I don't know how to do this. I've never learned how to be brave at work, or say something that's hard to say, or something that I think might be hard to hear. So we've not been trained or developed in our education. Maybe there are electives in college where you could talk about bravery or courage, but you know, most of us have not had any training or exposure or education on bravery in the workplace. We have an unrealistic view of bravery in the workplace, in our culture. So for example, we have Washington bravery, right? Washington standing on the boat, crossing the Delaware River, taking on the British, right? What a moment of bravery Washington was showing as he's crossing the Delaware. We see these pictures in our culture all about bravery, and there are all these people who are taking on insurmountable forces or challenging things that need to get challenged. And it creates really an unrealistic view of bravery and what it means at the workplace and much smaller and more personal interactions that we have with others. We also have entrepreneurial bravery, right? The Hewlett Packards and Bill Gates and Steve Jobs of the world have all founded their trillion-dollar companies in their garage or in their basement of their mother's house in some small town in California, you know, in the 1960s and 70s, right? And wow, they must have put everything in and had their charge cards had like 5 times the balance and things of that nature, right? So we create these kind of cultural entrepreneurial bravery moments that aren't realistic and don't affect all of us in the workplace. Hollywood bravery, do I need to even go there, right? Why are you going down in the basement with that flashlight when there's an axe murderer left in the house? Why aren't you leaving? But these are the things we create that personify bravery in our lives, and an untrue bravery, which we all participate in, right? We've all told little fibs, or we went to Matt David's house and had dinner last week, or I bumped into him in the mall, he said hi, right? I mean, we tell these little stories just about how brave we were or something that happened, and we perpetuate these experiences of bravery. And then there are most significantly a lack of organizational training. So companies, right? You go work at a company, they expect you to be brave and do things that are hard to do or say things that are hard to say, but don't provide extensive training. Not all companies, there certainly are some companies that provide training and courage and bravery, conflict navigation, these tougher topics that we all need to do from time to time, but most companies don't. And they just expect you, because you're a manager, to already have this skill set, which we know you don't have, because none of us ever learned it when we went to junior high, high school, and college. Then there's personal reasons, right? A lack of confidence. I just don't think I can say this to this person. I don't think I know how to say it to this person. I'm not the right person to say it to this person. There are two levels up. They're not going to listen to me. I'm too junior, right? We create all of these roadblocks in respect to why we're not confident in what we need to say and how we need to do it. Our past experiences with bravery, if they haven't been positive, or we haven't seen like David's father who thought he lost a job, right? If everyone thinks that's the case, no one's going to do it, right? Because if it didn't work for him, it's not going to work for any of us. We create fears and worries. I'm going to get terminated. I'm going to get demoted. My boss isn't going to like me. They're going to stare at me at meetings. It's going to be really uncomfortable. I'm not going there, right? This isn't my battle. I'm not going to fight it. We also have personality preferences. So perhaps, Amy, in the past, you guys have had somebody come in and talk about personality preferences. This is a profile that we all bring everywhere, all the time. It's how we take in information. It's how we make decisions. It's how we connect with others. Our personality preferences have a tremendous influence on bravery at work and the way that we interact with others. Maslow's theory of, I can't even remember the right word. What is it? Hierarchy. The bottom one is the second to the bottom one is a need for safety. Well, if one of my basic fundamental needs as a human being is safety, I'm not stepping into an unsafe situation. I'm just not going to do that, because I have a need, both physically, a home, a job, family, a car, right? To be safe and have things that I need in order to survive in the world. And I'm not going to step into an area that is unsafe. And so we created this model, which I'll share with you now, that I call P squared F squared, which is practice, presence, future focus, and flexibility. So I believe that if you do these 4 items, or some of the 4 items, you don't have to do all of them, that your likelihood for being brave will be greater. I wish I had a model, or I wish I had an answer that solved it 100% of the time. I don't know any model that's out there that solves everything 100% of the time. Perhaps there is. But I do believe that if you think of these 4 areas and put them into play, your likelihood for success is greater. These are not only my perspectives, but this is also the culmination of the feedback from people on the podcast conversations, as well as the survey. So this isn't just Ed in the shower saying, oh, I think I know what it is. But this is through that research of trying to identify what is it, right? What would you do, or what do you need in order to be more likely to be brave in the workplace? I'm just going to give you a couple of tips in each of these. We're just touching on them lightly tonight, but just think about practice, presence, future focus, one of my favorite coaching concepts, and flexibility to help you make great progress. So let's look at practice. These are recurring activities designed to help you get better at a skill or behavior, right? anytime you practice something, you're gonna get better at it. It's just human nature, right? Whether it's a sporting activity or mowing the lawn or, cooking, whatever you might be doing, the more you do it, the better you will be at it. And so here are 3 things that you should do in order to help you practice. If you are planning or feel a need to talk to somebody about something that might be hard to say or hard to do, you don't want the first time that you say it to be with that person. Right? Because it's just not going to come out right. Or there may be angles that you hadn't thought about, or there may be hot button words that you hadn't considered that will impact them in a negative way. So you have to practice. The first thing I think you need to do is get the information out of your head and put it down on a sheet of paper. And I call it creating talking points. It's not a script. These aren't, hey, here's what I want to say to you, and I'm going to hold it up as I read it to you. But these are talking points, things that you want to make sure you say sometime in the conversation. You also want to find a credible resource. If you're going to practice, you don't want to practice alone. So I might say, hey, Mark, I need to talk to Dave about something. This might be hard for him to hear. I'd love to practice it with you. Please tell me what, how do you feel when I'm saying it to you? Are there any hot button words that I'm using? Is there a better way for me to say it? Right, I need to practice it. Does that mean you have to live the conversation more than once? Yes. But again, you shouldn't, and you need to assure that the first time you say it isn't with the person that you want to impact the most. You want to have practiced it in order to make sure that you are navigating through it smoothly and comfortably. And you also have to be open to opportunities for improvement. So if Mark said, hey, Ed, you used a couple of words that really sparked me a little bit. Maybe there's a couple of other ways you can say it, or I don't know that you're starting the conversation correctly. Maybe there's another way, whatever it might be, you want to be open to opportunities for improvement. Just because you're feeling something doesn't mean you have the right answer, right? There might be other ways to say what needs to be said, other opportunities for you to say something in a very effective and positive way. The number one thing you need to do if you're going to be brave at work, more than you are today, or maybe for the first time, maybe for some of you, I've never had this happen, and I'd love to be braver at work than I am today. You have to practice what it is, and it can be with anyone. It can be with a next door neighbor, it can be with a family member, it can be with one of your kids, whoever it might be. Get it out of your head, get comfortable with what it is that you need to say, and as I mentioned, use talking points. And talking points are key items you want to make sure you say, but it's not a script, right? It's not what you're saying, but I want to make sure at some point in the conversation I say these 5 things. And you need to get them out of your head in order to do that. The second area you want to be focused on, assuming that you've done some practice, and I'd like to look at things including presentations, engagements, anything that I work on, having 3 sections: before, during, and after. So there's stuff that we did tonight before this meeting, and way more than I probably even know. There's stuff we're doing now, and there's stuff we're going to do after. And he's going to have everyone provide some feedback, please participate, but that's an after activity, right? So just like bravery, there's a before, which is practice. Now you're in it, and you're in the conversation, and the number one thing you have to do is you have to be present to that person. You have to be there with them. You're not there, in a canoe where you're, in the back and they're in the front, you're going down rocky waters. You're right there with them, ensuring that they know that your full attention is on what it is that you're bringing to their attention. So ensure that you have a good location. Don't use your office. Don't sit behind your desk like Noah and I, right? Noah's sitting here and I'm here, right? Sit next to the person so that you're eye level. Use a conference room, always lower emotional relationships that exist in conference rooms versus offices, but make sure you find the right location. Get rid of any electrical devices. Don't bring your cell phone, don't bring your laptop. Ask the person that you're speaking with, hey, I needed to speak with you a few minutes about something that I want to make sure that I share with you. Can we just make sure all of our technology is put away? Because you need to be present. They need to know that you're there to help, and it's all about them in that conversation. Make sure you eliminate distractions, and most importantly, while you want to share with them what it is that you want to share with them, you have to be curious. More often than not, the person's going to probably get defensive or want to explain why it is that they did what they did, or said what they said, or are the way they are, whatever it might be. And you want to be curious and ensure that you're asking questions and demonstrating curiosity. This is not a time for defensiveness or debating, or, because again, you're not there because you're right, you're there to help. And one way you can help is understand more about the other person's perspective. When I do leadership coaching, and very early in my career, I had these little wooden blocks made up, and I stole from Stephen Covey's book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Habit number 5, anybody know what it is? Seek first to understand, then to be understood. Unfortunately, in most of our corporations, we seek first to be understood, and then we'll ask somebody what they think, right? But your number one goal is seek first to understand why they said what they said, or did what they did, or are the way they are, before you start sharing with them what it is they need to know about the impact of that behavior or activity. So you want to be very curious, and you want to ask questions and ensure that you're having a conversation and a dialogue. Overall, you want to be present with that person 100%. All right, number 3. We love talking about the past. I'm not sure what it is about the past. You know, I even opened up with a story about the past, right? We just love talking about the past. And the past is interesting. I'm not denying that the past is interesting and that there's fantastic stories. And Ed, you have no idea, blah, 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 blah. But that's not where our answers are. Our answers are in the future. So in the midsection where you're actually having the conversation, you need to ensure that you're keeping your focus in the future. You might reflect on the past, and I love the word reflection, because reflection is a way of observing something that happened without reliving it and getting into the detail. When you remember, you're getting into the detail, and there's a lot of challenges with memory and how we see things and remember things and think about things. You can reflect on it, but you have to talk about the future and what it is you're looking for and what it is the person needs to do a little bit differently in order to be effective. So you want to reflect, you can't reflect on the past, but you want to focus on the future. If you focus on the future, your likelihood for success, your likelihood for talking about things that this person can do differently in order to be more effective is significantly greater than if you're just stuck in the past. You also have the opportunity anytime in the conversation, and this is true, quite frankly, in anything in life, where you're talking with somebody and your intuition is telling you that it's not going over well. They're fidgeting. You know, when I was in human resources, I always knew something wasn't going well with certain people because their neck used to get red. And I said, oh, well, okay, this isn't going well. You know, they might start sweating, their face might, whatever it might be. Well, this is not a movie. You know, this is not something that has to be done at this moment. You do something simple called pausing. You just stop and say, hey, Noah, I don't think that I'm having the impact that I hoped I would have in this conversation. Let's just stop for a minute. What's going through your mind? What's happening, right? You don't have to just get it all out at that moment. Pausing is and my wife hates the word pausing because I use it all the time. Ed's using that word. But pausing is an incredibly powerful leadership skill. And I just wish there were, there's just 5 things I wish all leaders did. And one of them is pausing. So when I'm up there talking and we're having a conversation, if I even remotely believe I'm losing you, or it's not of interest, or you disagree, I should pause and say, hey, what are you thinking? I'm not sure that we're in agreement to the degree that I thought we would, or I'm not sure that you're hearing what it is that I'm trying to say, or did I lose you, whatever it might be. But one way to keep it future focused is to pause, because if you're talking and they're going this way and you're going this way, it's too huge of a gap. You've got to make sure you're together, and to be together, because you're also being present, is ensure that you're staying future focused in the conversation. The last area is flexibility. Oops. Um, There it is. So the last area is flexibility. I would love to suggest that all of you are brilliant, and anytime you need to talk to somebody about something that you've got the right answer. Hey, I just needed to talk to you about this. Here's what you need to do. Just start doing it. Everything will be great. Okay, I'll see you tomorrow. But unfortunately, life just isn't that simple. There may be things you don't realize, there may be things that you don't know. The person might say, well, Ed, you know, there is a reason that I said that. And I don't know that anybody knows this, but let me tell you about it. Okay, no, I'd love to hear it, right? Suddenly my whole perspective changes, right? Because there was something that I didn't realize caused or was the purpose or reason for the person behaving the way that they were behaving. So you always want to ensure, especially if you're going to be curious, as we were being future focused, you have to listen. So listening along with pausing are two great leadership style behaviors. You know, the Bill Gates and the Steve Jobs of the world and the Warren Buffetts of the world will tell you one of their key behaviors they do again and again and again is they hire great people and then they listen to them. They don't sit there and make orders and talk from the podium and tell everybody what to do, but they listen to them and then come up with better decisions. So you need to listen to ensure whatever answers you're moving toward, there's flexibility around. You always want to have options. And so I believe in the rule of three. I keep repeating his name and I don't need to, but Steve Jobs was a big believer in this concept of three, middle, beginning, and end. Three exists within our lives everywhere, right? When you think about it, stoplights, the Three Musketeers, the Three Amigos, you know, I mean, just over and over and over again, there's something magic about the number of three. So you want to have some options. You don't want to go in and just say, hey, here's what you should do. But hey, Ed, here's three things that might work. And let's talk about each of them and decide, or pick a fourth or fifth one, because I don't have all the answers, but I wanted to bring this to your attention so you were aware of the impact that you're having on others in the organization and suggest a way that you might do it a little bit differently to be more effective. And you always don't have to have the right answer. So you don't have to go in and say, hey, here's what I'm experiencing. Here's why I think you should know it. And here's what you should do. I mean, I wish life was that simple, but unfortunately it's not. The first two are accurate. Hey, here's what I'm hearing or experiencing, and here's the impact that it's having. I don't think that's the impact that you want to have. No, of course it's not. So let's come up with some options on things that you could do a little bit differently to be more effective. I've got some suggestions, and I'd love to hear your suggestions. So that's a great way to ensure that you are looking for a way to be brave at work. So, practice, present, future focused, and flexibility are the four areas that, again, through the survey, through my own experiences, both corporately, as well as a leadership coach, and through the survey that really bubble to the top as reasons that people believe that they did more of historically, that they would have been braver at work. And I think that's it. So now we're going to open it up to either a few more bravery stories for somebody who wanted to share one but didn't get the chance to share earlier, or any questions or thoughts that you might have. Yes, hold on one second. We have our mic person. Welcome.
One comment, in one of your slides, you have mentioned there is no formal education about being brave. I oppose that. In schools now, even in elementary schools, there are bullying weeks where they tell how to participate, how to report, and how to be empathetic. And the programs are doing very well in every school. This is kind of mandatory these days. And in middle schools, they have courses and options and clubs for different things like the debating clubs, drama clubs, journalism related courses. But again, it comes to the personality of the person and circumstances and how their parents are obviously. And of course, all other factors that comes into the picture. So I would like to make that comment because I run a nonprofit on bullying and domestic violence. And I see a lot of children and also people who gets bullied at workplace as well. So I do wanted to make sure that everybody is aware things change. Not in my childhood, may not be in your childhood, but now things change a lot more.
Great, well, thank you. And no argument with anything that you just said. What I looked for were programs that focused on bravery at work, right? And yeah, I'd love to talk to you more about what your experience has been, but thank you for sharing that. What other questions might you have about bravery at work?
Similar, one of the slides.
Hold on one second.
Thank you, Dr. Lucas here. One of your slides, you were giving us a list of why we are not brave at work, generally speaking. Well, one thing that came to mind was in this day and age, we work with a diverse audience. In some projects that I've worked, there are cultural differences that impact that greatly. So we're with a company in Japan and the communication is high context, depending on who you talk to versus the US, if it's low context. You could be the CEO and I can go up and say like, hey, how you doing? Not a problem. Any common reaction to why we're not able to work when cultural differences impact our interactions?
Well, and I think it is culture, right, that has had the impact that it has. There are certainly variations of bravery at work based on culture. There are variations in bravery at work based on gender. These are all factors that influence, the time that we had today, right? I just wanted to give a high level overview of being brave at work, and we could spend more time on gender-based bravery and cultural-based bravery, etc. My personal belief, and based on the research that was done, is culturally, we live in a somewhat, and for any of us that watch CNN, I know this is going to sound crazy, low conflict environment, something seems to happen every day in the US, but we just avoid conflict, right? I mean, we've been raised in the junior high school to be respectful to people and so forth and so on. I'm not saying conflict is good, but conflict is something that will happen, and it is something we need to figure out how to navigate effectively. There are people who believe if you're on a team where there's never any conflict, that's bad, that there should be healthy, respectful, professional conflict, swapping of ideas, etc. So, I do believe it's largely cultural in how we've been raised and how we've grown up in respect to how we're expected to behave. Not 100% accurate in respect to, certain specific groups of situations, etc. But in general, that's what our research has shown. So thank you. What else, Maggie?
So a question and a comment. The first was a question: is there any sizable difference between being brave at work and being brave in life? And do you want the comment too?
Wow, that's a weighty question.
That's like, yeah, that's an easy one. You can just just roll that up. And the comment from Phil was, I want to be brave enough to tell someone senior to me that they are not a good listener. They assume that they know what the answer is and interrupt. Sometimes assuming the answer is something I had just explained was irrelevant, but they weren't listening. What is the best way to get someone who does not listen to you to listen long enough to have this conversation?
Two weighty questions. Well, while our research wasn't focused on bravery at work versus bravery at life, again, personally, I believe that bravery is a feeling that we have when something needs to be said or done that is hard to do or say. I believe it transitions through everything in life, whether it's work, personal. There have been conversations I've had to have with my daughters that I put off week after week after week because I didn't know how to say it, when to say it, how to, et cetera. So I do believe that bravery is something that exists in all aspects of our lives, whether it's at work or in life. And I would say, was it Phil? That, I would encourage him to, and Amy, are we going to send the slides out to people? Right. So when he gets the slides, he should think about putting the model into play. First, get it out of his head, what it is that he wants to say, right? Create some talking points. Find somebody he can practice with. And maybe it's someone who says, okay, now you don't listen well, so act like a bad listener for a few minutes, right? Because I need to figure out ways to pull you back in. And then schedule a time to meet with the person and be present with that person. Open up with, hey, Ed, I needed to talk to you for a few minutes about something. This may be hard for you to hear. And what I'd like you to do, if you would, is just listen to me for 3 minutes. You can't be long, because if someone's not a good listener, you will lose them after 2 or 3 seconds, right? So you have to be brief to create interest on their part, to now say, all right, tell me more about what you're saying. Because now if they're asking questions and want to hear more, their likelihood for listening is going to be a little bit better. Be future focused, talk about what it is you're looking for. Not being a good listener is not something you can change overnight. You have to practice that and look for ways to practice that. You might need an accountability partner who can help him get better at it, his boss, not Phil. And then be flexible in the ways that he can get there. So I hope that's helpful. We have 3 more minutes. What else? Any other questions that folks have, or what other questions might you have? Or do we need to wrap up? Okay. Okay, one more. Yes, Mark.
I'll give you a loaded question again. So you were talking about the different environments. I know we don't have a lot of time left. What do you suggest if you're in an environment that doesn't have that psychological safety in order to have those conversations? Because we touched on it, but we didn't go into too much about what to do if you know you're not in that type of environment.
So psychological safety is another concept that I think bravery runs corollary with, right? It's not a replacement for, but it operates at the same time. Psychological safety is a characterization of a team. It's of an environment where you can be who you are, say what you need to say, ask what you need to ask without, again, feeling like you're being belittled or people are rolling their eyes or they're embarrassed to be in the room with you, whatever it might be. You might ask someone to repeat something that they have said twice. You might say, hey, I don't really understand what it is that you're suggesting. Can you go over it again or say it a different way? Whatever it might be, you feel safe, right? And this is hard to do in most organizations. I have seen in my career way more unpsychologically safe teams. And I don't mean that they're unsafe, but they just don't operate in a way that creates this particular type of safety. And so something all of you can do is, there's a couple of authors of books, Amy Edmondson, who wrote The Fearless Organization, which is about psychological safety. It's a great book. Timothy Clark is another professor and has written the 4 stages or phases of psychological safety, which I like because it's got 4 stages. First one's inclusion, right? That I feel included. I'm supposed to be here. And if I'm supposed to be here, I can say what I need to say and do what I need to say. I buy those books, read those books, and think of ways that you can introduce to your boss or whoever it might be, or if you are the team leader, setting up those expectations for the team in one of the first meetings. Hey, I want this to be a great, effective, wonderful team. And what I want us to do is start role modeling something called psychological safety. This came from something called Project Aristotle, which was a study of Google. And of all the reasons that they could have come out of Google as to why certain teams were effective, the number one reason was this thing called psychological safety, that people could say what they needed to say or do what needed to be done without feeling bad or wrong or like they're in the wrong place. So it's a really interesting area, and embedded in that is bravery, right? To say what I need to say and do it respectfully and professionally. So hopefully that answered your question.
3 minutes.
There you go. Look at that. All right, everyone, thank you so much for your time tonight. It's been great being here.